How has Stoicism helped you I mean, you've done very well. You've done lots of interesting things. You've been at the top of the author game, the podcast game. You've been a great investor. How do you think of Stoicism in that sense as something that helps you deal with what we would call champagne problems or too much of a good thing? Like Stoicism is also
You
there.
can see the YouTube thumbnail now. Tim Ferriss on champagne problems. There are a few things that immediately come to mind. So the first is I do a lot of things that I know are perceived by many people to be high risk that I don't consider high risk at all, because I've run through exercises and journaling and so on that lean very heavily on Stoic practices,
Yeah.
and have come to the definitive conclusion that this is not holistically high risk
I see.
in the long game,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
the real world MBA where I traded Stanford Business School for the
Crucible of angel investing.
That's right.
Yeah.
The in theory Tim Ferriss fund of angel investing that I deployed over 2 years. And yes, there was a risk. Even the expectation, it wasn't even just a risk. I expected that, like tuition, that money would vanish. And I was like, okay, let's assume the money vanishes.
Yeah.
How can I approach the angel investing in such a way that my skills and relationships developed over that period of time far exceed what I am expecting to lose?
Yeah.
And so I pulled the trigger. Now, the timing was also incredibly lucky in retrospect. At the time, it wasn't obvious, but in retrospect, it was very lucky. But there was also some deliberation around it, in the sense that, and I think this is compatible with, it might not be verbatim reflective of Stoic writings, but thinking about competition very carefully. In other words, so this is Seneca's not the only who has written about this, but in terms of competing with your peers and
keeping up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses. Oh, you want to wear a purple tunic, do you? Let's talk about that.
You think you're a success. That person has more than you. So you're not.
Right. You feel like you need to go to the banquets and you need to do this and you need to do that. When I find an area that is crowded or competitive, I look at that as an opportunity to find something that is very uncrowded.
Oh, sure.
So that has also helped me. For instance, I'm coming up on the 10th year of the podcast, and podcasting has become incredibly competitive.
Yeah.
And there was a long time when I felt like I was category of one. And if I'm being honest with myself, that's no longer the case. There's some very, very good interviewers out there, yourself among them. And the production quality has gone parabolic.
Yeah.
It is going to be harder to build a business and to successfully fight for attention in this particular format. And I love doing my podcast. I'm going to continue doing it. However, because I would pay to have these conversations anyway, by and large, I'm taking a moment to say, all right, wait a second. When I did angel investing from, say, 2008 to 2015, it got crowded. I felt like it went from single deck blackjack, where you can kind of count the cards, to like, 5 deck. And then the table stakes got a lot higher because the terms got weird. There was a lot of money coming in from places like China and sovereign wealth funds. And I was like, oh man, this is going to get now the risk is real for me financially.
Sure.
So I stopped for a while. And I've done that over and over again, right? Stopped the books for a while. And in this particular case, I'm like, all right, I may not find an answer, but it would be a mistake not to look for an answer. Like, what's neglected? And that's not necessarily something new. For instance, I think text is neglected.
Yes.
I think writing is neglected.
Yes.
And text isn't dead. It's just not surfaced by the algorithms. It's just not favored at the moment. But
it's the most perennial of the mediums.
It's the most perennial, and it's the hardest. So if I'm looking at differentiation and competitive advantage, you have this too, right? You can write. Writing's hard.
Yeah.
Writing is very, very hard, at least for me. And for that reason, I'm like, all right, well, maybe it's just the return to basics in that sense. Maybe it's fitting something old into a new vehicle. et cetera, et cetera. Let's come up with a lot of bad ideas to see if there's maybe one or two good ideas we can test. And so to come back to your question, though, I think that is a way of avoiding comparison with others that can lead directly to outperformance if we're talking about success in financial terms. But it's also very compatible with success on your own terms, right? I think Kevin Kelly's a great example of this, right? Has really forged his own life. There are other people for sure, but he's very good at questioning basic assumptions that are common, right? They're so common that it's taken to be fact, but in most instances, you can kind of negotiate reality around a lot of these assumptions.
I was thinking of other sort of success problems that Stoicism helps with, like haters is probably one, or people who don't like you, or negative attention on top of. Yeah.
I mean, the more, especially if your version of success or what you're pursuing is going to make you more public, you are going to have to deal with all sorts of things that, at least at current, you have not faced this magnitude of negative attention.
Yes.
And I've seen people buckle under that if they don't have the toolkit. And the toolkit doesn't have to be sophisticated, by the way. Like rule number 1, don't go looking for it.
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of like, all right, if you're going to like do shuffle sprints on top of like broken floorboards, you're going to stub your toe all the time. And then I'll admire you if you have the best stub toe fix, but maybe you just shouldn't run across the floorboards barefoot, which is what a lot of folks do when they're kind of hunting for comments, but being human, ending up fixating on the 1 or 2 people who are awful.
I remember one time you said something like, okay, so let's say how many people know who you are, right? Like the first part of your career as a creative person, or really anything that relies on the public, is you want lots of people to find out who you are. Your first problem is a lack of awareness. And then you get the awareness. Now, a certain percentage of those people are not going to like you, or they're going to have had a bad experience, or you're going to trigger something.
Or they're going to be nuts.
Yeah, right. So like, Daily Stoic has, let's say, 3 million Instagram followers. So let's say 10% of those people are just not fans. That's hundreds of thousands of people who just who know who you are, but don't like you. Whereas in normal life, if 10% of the people you meet don't like you, those people could fit in a small SUV. You know what I mean? Like it's not that many people. But
and also like 20 years ago, they're not enabled with the ability to publicly.
They can't reach all the other people. Yeah, right. Yeah. And so I think that's a very key. So Marcus Aurelius has to come to terms with the fact that he's the emperor of Rome. Some people don't even like that there's an emperor. Some people don't like him for good reasons. Some people don't like him for bad reasons. But the point is, you're not going to please everyone. And in fact, part of the job is just putting up with the fact that a bunch of people hate you, and having to come to terms with the fact that 1, it's outside your control. You can't make everyone like you. And 2, if you try to make those people who don't like you, or you spend your time obsessing about them, what you're doing is making yourself miserable and not servicing or serving the people and things that do like you, that you are good at.
Yeah, totally. I was wondering, I don't know if you know this is a pretty sort of arcane fact to ask for, but do you have any idea what the greater, not the Roman Empire, but the greater Rome area, let's just call it, just like you would have the greater Austin area, or Rome Central, do you have any idea what the population was around Marcus Aurelius's day? So
the empire, I know, because I looked it up for something, is like 50 million people. So let's say Rome is 10% of that, right? There's still millions of people, right? I don't know
where I was going with that is like more people may dislike you,
yes,
and me individually, than hated Marcus Aurelius, at his peak as the last of the great emperors of Rome.
Yeah, totally.
Which is kind of hilarious to think about.
Or to think there's probably more Stoics now than have ever existed before in history, right? There may be more people who know about Stoicism but don't like me specifically than have ever been interested in Stoicism ever, right? Like, the numbers get really big really fast because that's what technology allows for. When you live in a world of 8 billion people, technology allows you to reach lots and lots of people. And it's not healthy or realistic for humans to be subjected to that, but we are subjected to it, right? Like, so you think success is going to be amazing, and it is in a lot of ways, but it's subjecting you to a fundamentally unnatural, really difficult thing, which is like, you have to wake up and deal with the weight of the fact that like lots of people like hate you, like they hate you. And if you don't have the sort of fortitude and the confidence to just sit with that and to not let it eat at you or make you swerve off what you think you're supposed to be doing, like you're going to get eaten alive.
Yeah, you'll get eaten alive. And
you'll eat yourself alive.
You'll eat yourself alive. And I think Stoicism and reflecting on applications of Stoic-like thinking, right? Because I'm not a Stoic fundamentalist,
sure,
right? I'm not like, this is the scripture. This is the end all be all. It's like, well, let's like extend that. Right, exactly. Right? So like, let's expand. All right. What other ways could this type of thinking apply? And I think that extends to 80-20 principle, Richard Koch type stuff. I think it extends to, it's really about the number of people who get it, not the number of people who don't get it. So Kevin Kelly, 1,000 True Fans type of thinking, blue ocean versus red ocean, blue ocean strategy kind of stuff. These are all highly, highly compatible. And I would go further to say there are a lot of people who, at this point, they've probably heard the word Stoic, at least in the modern sense, lowercase. But they're not familiar with the canon of Stoicism. Yet, if you look at anyone who has thrived in what most people would consider high stress environments, they're going to walk the walk. I think that there's such a selection bias. There's a survival bias towards anyone who indirectly or directly has put into practice these principles on a regular basis. That if you look at, and this is just, these are hypotheticals. I haven't asked these people, but like anyone from a Bob Iger to a hedge fund manager to an exceptionally good athlete who has had longevity. If you were to sit them down and walk them through Marcus Aurelius and so on for the first time, they'd be like, oh yeah. No, that's how I live my life.